Good evening, folks. I'm meteorologist Ross Mummah, joined by the one and only, the legend, chief meteorologist Tim Deegan. He's looking around, but
I am looking around.
He's right there. Tim, we've had a lot of people, we've had some people call in, people online, talking on social media, wherever, about the chance for some sort of winter weather.
Did you say it? Did you say the S word?
No, I'm not going to say the S word yet.
Okay.
We just started.
Okay.
No, I'm going to go winter weather, maybe winter precip. We kind of had this scenario, like 2 weeks ago, when kind of like the Mississippi River Valley, the Tennessee River Valley, they saw all the snow. The Atlanta metro saw a decent amount of snow, at least for the northern part of the metro. So here we are again, potentially.
We are now. And folks, I'm not interrupting at all because I respect Ross as being both the pilot and the analyzer, but he told me that I could occasionally hop in.
Occasionally.
But as a forecaster, here, tell me if you can relate to this. As a forecaster, what I think about on that event is 2 weeks prior to it happening. So if we're going to get to the nitty gritty, the GFS was showing not only a maybe event for us, it was showing like one of the most significant snow events we'd see here in a long time. That was the GFS. 2 weeks before it happened, but at least in my mind, once we got about 10 days out, the European was showing no signs of that. And then as it turns out, when I say no signs, I mean for us, right here on the First Coast. And then as it turns out, the European did a much better job. Now, this particular event, we're now within what? Instead of 2 weeks out, this is looking 20th to the 24th. So what, 6 to 10 days?
Yeah, this will start next Monday and it goes through next Friday.
So now we're already like at least conservatively 5 days closer to that other event, right? As far as forecasters.
Yeah.
And we might say if we're going to jump ahead to say the iffiest day is Tuesday, would you say?
Yeah, Tuesday, potentially into early Wednesday,
so
maybe.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, so now we're talking 5 to 6 days out. So in my mind, that means both of the models should be better. And I think you'll agree that both of the models are a lot closer now than that event, of earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. I think we still have a long way to go until then. Yeah, we're still 5, 6 days out. So it's going to take a little bit until we get those models to become more in line. One thing we are locked in with, at least, though, is the cold, right? We have a big swath of rain on the way this weekend. We'll talk about that here coming up a little bit later on, but the cold will certainly come in behind our weekend rain chances. Highs probably going to be in the 40s, Tim. Lows at least down to near freezing, potentially lower than that as we head into the middle part of next week. So the cold will likely be in place. Now, just how cold is maybe one of the questions we still have to, answer. And that's kind of going to be dependent on where you can call it this storm system or this kind of just boundary between different air masses from the north and the south, where exactly it's going to track through. One, option potentially could be a little bit more of a southerly track that would bring in colder air, but also some drier air. We might not see nearly as much precipitation. I think we're still going to see some rain at least, but maybe the snow chances aren't going to be there. There it is. I said it. The old S word.
You said the snow word. And of course, folks, when we say wintry precipitation, we're including flakes, sleet, freezing rain. Probably as far as driving around, our biggest concern is if a freezing rain event develops. And I think, not that any of this is likely, but tell me if you agree, Ross, I would say there's a higher chance of freezing rain, especially on bridges, than really snowflakes.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah, I would agree. So I think maybe far northern places might see a few flakes, and we'll get into that then.
Yeah.
But no, I think the much better chance would be for freezing rain here because we're going to have, we kind of talked about this earlier, kind of off screen, the overrunning where you're going to have that warm nose.
Okay, time out. So Ross is using some great meteorology words, but we're going to make sure we know what we're talking about here. So he's used the word cold. I'm going to try to force Ross to be more definitive about cold. He's used the word overrunning. Is that one word or two words?
Maybe hyphenated?
Okay, there. I love that answer. That's fantastic. So we're going to have Ross define more specifically cold, and I'm going to ask him a couple questions here, and more specifically overrunning. But before I get to those questions for Ross, and I'm going to do that not only because Ross can become
because there's a test after
relatively
this.
Eloquent. No. For those of you that don't know, Ross grew up in Pennsylvania, and although all of us get meteorology, I do believe that where you grew up, we can all become experts in different areas, but I do think people tend to have their strongest foundations from where they cometh, if that makes sense. And so therefore, truly, I give Ross focus on these kind of events because he grew up where they have these kind of forecasts way more often. But before I get to that, pick on Ross in just a bit, I want to at least share, and Ross has already said it, why I'm a little more anxious about this event than others during the winter. And here's why. So I'm really just underlining what Ross just said. Typically, if it's cold enough to snow here on the First Coast, and that's rare, but if it's cold enough to snow, it's too dry. We don't have the precipitation. More often than not during the winter, it may feel cold, and we have the precipitation, but it's not cold enough to snow. So it's rare in this part of the world that we're just close enough to where maybe it's going to be cold enough to snow and maybe there's going to be enough moisture. So in my mind, that's why I'm a little more anxious about this forecast, as Ross mentioned, 5 to 6 days out. Okay, so first, I'm going to have Ross define cold, and I'm going to have him focus a little bit because I'll give the easy part. Although we all think that, yes, temperatures need to be at freezing, actually, for a more significant, especially sleet or snow event, it doesn't necessarily have to be freezing, folks, at the surface. What matters is just, now some of us like to use the word aloft, others just say up, so we're going to define where is up, and I mean at the vertical level. So here's my two questions, Ross, and I think you'll understand where I'm getting at. What do you consider cold enough to snow at 5,000 feet? And there's a term called thickness that us meteorologists use. These are terms that, Ross, I'm sure you used a lot in Pennsylvania. So Ross, I think when he defines cold, is going to talk to us a little about how significant the 5,000 foot level temperature is and what's this whole thing about thickness.
Well, I'm not going to tell you an exact number, Tim, because I think it depends not only what's aloft, because you can get, temperatures are, I don't know, near 30.
Okay, let me ask
aloft,
you this. Okay,
at 5,000 feet, you need a 540 thickness typically, right? That's what everyone thinks about the rain-snow line, but I don't think that's a ride or die line to follow.
But at least we're getting closer now, I think, than cold. For instance, my wife, if it's below 80, it's cold. So I'm just trying to narrow it down a little bit. Okay, but that's interesting. I tend to think of 850 millibars, which is about 5,000 feet. I tend to want to see about minus 3 degrees Celsius, so about 27 degrees, 28 degrees. But I don't have as much experience as you have. So what you're saying is seriously, but you're saying that maybe 850 can be just -1 or -2, and you can still get snow. Right?
Typically, it's just a very, very wet snow. I mean, you're talking
still,
like
people here don't care. If they
see snowflakes that are just like clumps of.
But if people just want to see flakes, you're saying maybe even just you're saying maybe even 30 degrees at like 850.
Yeah, I would say 30. Yeah, I would say that's the warmest you could be at 850.
Okay, gotcha. Now, thickness, folks, when we talk about thickness, and correct me if you think of a better way to put this, Ross, but when we talk about thickness, it's sort of a it is a meteorological way of saying how cold is the overall atmosphere. Because really, when we're looking aloft, we want to know what's it like, not only at the surface, but 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 25,000 feet. And thickness is a good way to look at that. And so if you're looking real quick at a map, and you don't have a lot of time to make a decision, we tend to look at the 540 thickness, like Ross talked about. But Ross, like for instance in Pennsylvania, have you seen snow with thickness maybe as high as 546?
Yes.
Okay. What about 552?
No, I doubt it.
Okay. I've seen sleet here with thickness as high as 558.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen snow here more than about 542, but you've had more examples of it.
And that's talking about when you're talking about 540 or 556, those are the heights at the 500 millibar level. So how many feet up would that be?
About 18,000 feet.
Yeah, I mean pretty high up there. So that's talking about.
That's why I would say is way aloft.
Yes.
Right.
So you're talking about the air temperature much further aloft in the atmosphere. So you got to think about when you're talking about snow, the temperature profile of the entire atmosphere. You have to take into account what the temperature is at the surface, what it is 10,000 feet above, and then 20,000 feet aloft. And that will dictate what kind of precipitation you get. Is it all just rain? Is it freezing rain? Is it all snow? Depending on, is it just cold at the surface and much colder aloft, or is there a warm nose kind of wedged in there that your precipitation might be frozen at the start, it melts through the warm layer of air, and then comes down to the surface where it's cold again. So there's a lot of different factors that come into it, Tim.
See, folks, did you hear that word? Profile. I love it because that covers a lot of the vertical extent. So we've talked about. I think maybe we've defined a little better what cold is. So what about? But of course we have to have the moisture. At least the way I'm looking at it is there's two way we're gonna have north and northeast winds. So it's going to be kind of like a localized nor'easter. But that kind of event, folks, we can get precipitation in two different ways, or sometimes they're combined. One is the more coastal event. That is, we end up with rain, drizzle developing right on the coast.
Low clouds,
and that tends to. It's really tough for that to be a frozen event, especially as far as sleet and snow. We might get freezing rain from that, but that tends to be more in the way of a cold rain event. The easier way, if we can put it that way, for us to get just plain old snow is an upper level event. That is where it's primarily coming at us from the southwest under the jet stream. And it really is, like Ross said, mostly falling from like 15, 18, 20,000 feet. And so
now maybe explain why the upper level system brings us a better snow chance rather than just more of the coastal localized event.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to.
No, I'm telling you. Okay. I'm asking you to say it.
Okay, so the way we look at it, folks, is actually look at it two ways. First of all, if it's an upper level event, and when we say upper level, let's say 18,000 feet or higher, we have a lot more confidence in predicting what that temperature will be and how much moisture there will be as the system heads toward us from a longer range. And so if we see a snow event occurring from the upper levels heading our way, super rare for us, but if we do, we have a little more confidence that, you know what, that's going to happen. In this particular event, we're right on the fringes with the upper levels. In fact, Ross is showing, this is the GFS model, and that's showing a combination of snow, sleet, and freezing rain actually getting into the area with a north wind. Now that's 5 to 6 days out.
And these are going to be very steep gradients when you're talking about who sees rain and who might potentially see winter precipitation. The difference between 5-10 miles can make a world of difference. So just for example, you're talking strictly Duval County. You live up at the airport, you might see freezing rain. Whereas if you live either downtown or on the south side, you might just get a cold rain that Tim was talking about. So it's not just a stamp it down, everyone's going to see this or everyone's going to see this. I think it really will depend on how the system lines up, and where you just happen to live will dictate what kind of precipitation you might see from this, Tim. Right?
And totally agree. And I think it's going to be accentuated because I do also think we're going to have some moisture coming in from the ocean. So the ocean is going to moderate those surface temperatures. So it could be that folks, for instance, east of I-95, that maybe it's briefly cold enough for snow and or sleet, but because the winds are coming in off the ocean temperature sitting at 55 to 60 degrees, there's going to be enough of a thick layer down the lower few thousand feet to where then that will melt on the way down. Whereas the west side and the north side of Duval, and we're not saying they're exactly going to have it, but just to give you an example, whereas it could be the west and north side do get some both freezing rain and sleet. At this point, I would put the chances of frozen precipitation below 10% if you're in Duval, along the beaches or in St. Johns and Flagler County. I would say...
Would you toss clay in there too?
Right along the river. But I wouldn't be surprised if... see, to me, here's another big question that develops. Is does the cold air stay in place? In other words, the northeast wind, even though the models do better now than they used to, I still think the models tend to push that northeast wind against the cold air. We call it a cold wedge, a little too fast. And I think that that damming occurs closer to the coast. So yeah, maybe right along the river, but I'm not nearly as confident that Clay County is going to be all liquid.
The Europeans getting a little.
And now we're showing some crazy computer models here. So we should probably talk about what those colors mean. So the deeper blues is pretty much snow and sleet, right? And
primarily snow. Yeah, the darkest bluish purple color is kind of moving into the slate, and really just the pink color is considered just a mix in this color palette. So a mix can be rain and snow. It can be freezing rain. It can be sleet. So it's kind of the pink is a gray area here of almost saying we don't really know what exactly it's going to be yet.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. To me, the main reason we're talking about this is that there's a significant chance, and therefore it makes sense to talk about it. We're not saying it simply to hype it up. But yeah, I have no problem myself saying that that especially over northeastern Florida, this is a very iffy event. But I do think the chances are high enough to at least think about icy bridges for those of you in Ware, Pierce, Brantley, and Charlton counties. That's a great 3D graphic right there.
When we were talking about the temperature profile, I think this is...
You could talk about overrunning there too.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So when I brought up overrunning earlier, that is the warm air overrunning over top of the more shallow, colder air at the surface. So if you look straight up from the freezing rain part there, it's cold at the surface. Temperatures are typically at or below 32 degrees. It's below freezing at the surface, but you just go up a couple thousand feet and the temperature is actually warmer. So because of that, in that warmer air, the precipitation falling is typically just water. It's just rain. And then once it hits the surface where those temperatures are closer to 32 degrees, that's when you start to get it to be freezing. You get the black ice and the freezing rain and that such. As you go further to the right there, sleet, that colder air at the surface is going to be a little bit thicker. It's not nearly as shallow as it is in freezing rain. So the more warm air you have aloft, the better chance you have to have either just plain old rain or freezing rain. The more cold air you have at the surface and less warm air aloft, the better chance you have of getting either sleet or just plain old snow there.
Okay, I feel like my job is done because my main goal, folks, was to get Ross to define more specifically what do you mean by cold, and then what do you mean by overrunning. I'm going to go do the 7 o'clock broadcast, and Ross will wrap it up for us. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Tim. So you can catch Tim on the 7 p.m. news here in just a couple minutes if you're tired of listening to me. But if you're not, let's carry on here. So this is just what one of those snow models that we were showing you is trying to depict. This is the GFS American model of just what might we see by next Tuesday and Wednesday. Now this includes all types of frozen precipitation. So this could be snow, freezing rain, and sleet, less than an inch. So again, we're not expecting much, if any at all, but it just does kind of emphasize the possibility of it. And you heard Tim mention there for folks who live up near Waycross and Blackshear and really all across the Okefenokee, Tuesday, potentially into early Wednesday morning, that's going to be where you have the best chance to maybe see some freezing rain and maybe just some wet snowflakes trying to mix in. And again, the main concern will really just be watching for the freezing on some of those overpasses and those bridges trying to ice up, because typically those are the first locations that do. So this is kind of just to kind of wrap up in total what we're feeling good about right now and what we're maybe, a little bit more iffy on, what we're not feeling so confident about. So first, we feel pretty locked in that it is going to be cold in the sense that daytime highs will be in the 40s, yes, but morning lows will be down into the low 30s, potentially upper 20s. So at the surface, temperatures will be cold enough to see freezing precipitation. It's all going to be about how warm temperatures are aloft in the atmosphere to dictate whether we see just rain, freezing rain, or sleet, particularly in those early morning hours when the temperatures at the surface are cold enough. So yes, it is going to be potentially some of our coldest air of the year working its way in here early next week. The low clouds and at a minimum rain are quite likely. You heard Tim mention the kind of coastal system, or not system, but just coastal setup. Low clouds, northeast onshore flow is just going to keep things kind of drizzly and dreary there at a minimum. We're very confident on that. And then I think we can safely say that there's still plenty of uncertainty because we are still about 5 days out. A lot of these models, they're a good guide, but you can't trust them, fully, really at any time. But you got to give it really closer to about that 3-day mark before you can really start to hone in on what exactly is going to happen and what are these models trying to depict. So because of that, the exact precipitation type and the timing of when we might see that, whether it's in, late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, and is it, just up across the Okefenokee, or do we include the Suwannee Valley and the whole way down towards northern Duval County and Nassau and, coastal southeast Georgia? That is all still up in the air. So we still got to wait a little bit while longer. We get more data in. We'll be able to fine tune that. And then we've kind of talked about, is it just going to be that more of a shallow system right there along the coast, or is it going to be much more of an upper level system that brings us a much better chance to see some of that snow? So because we don't typically get winter weather forecasting here, this is just a quick thing to keep in mind. By about that 4-day mark out from the event, we're still more or so just looking at trends in the models to see if they're becoming more consistent and if they're becoming more similar with one another. So a lot more to kind of iron out and to be discussed with that over the next couple of days. But I also want to just get your weekend covered here. Our weather team has issued a weather impact alert for your Saturday afternoon and evening, and also through the first half of your Sunday. So this runs from noon to noon, Saturday to Sunday, primarily due to really light to even heavy rain at times moving in across the First Coast, some of which could lead to some ponding on the roadways. So because of that, if you do have any outdoor plans this weekend, those might be impacted or hindered. And then just driving on the roads because of the ponding, you're just going to need to take it a little bit slower and heed some caution to that. So across Southeast Georgia, the Okefenokee, you'll see rain come Saturday morning. Most of this doesn't reach the Jacksonville metro until about midday, and then you'll expect off and on scattered showers throughout much of the evening on Saturday, and then overnight Saturday night and into early Sunday morning, here really comes a big swath of heavy rain. So if you're an early riser come Sunday morning, maybe heading out to a church service or anything like that, any sort of brunch plans you might have Sunday morning, heavy rain will be on the way. Good news, by I'd say midday at the earliest, at the latest, I'm thinking maybe 3 to 4 p.m., most of the rain is going to begin to push off to the east and southeast. So we'll gradually begin to clear out and dry out by Sunday evening. So here's just another way to break it down and to look at it there. We will be warmer. Temperature's going to be in the mid to upper 60s for both your Saturday and your Sunday. Heaviest rain coming in Saturday night and through Sunday morning. Sunday evening, though, finally beginning to clear out. But a lot of us could pick up 1 to even 2 inches of rain. I think some localized areas could pick up 2 to even 3, depending on where some of those heavier downpours and potentially isolated thunderstorms do roll on through. We're not expecting severe weather, but don't be surprised if you hear a couple rumbles of thunder and just, a few strong wind gusts and maybe 40 to 45 miles per hour. So rainy weekend here. Now, if you want to go somewhere that you can lock in the snow, well, you got a boatload of choices there. You can head up to either Philadelphia for the Eagles and Rams game this weekend, which you can watch on NBC 12, kickoff at 3 p.m. Snow showers are expected throughout the game up there. Similar story for the Rams, the Ravens playing up in Buffalo against the Bills. They could see some snow showers. Wind chills are going to be in the single digits. There comes Sunday night. So plenty of cold air and snow potential elsewhere here along the First Coast there. time will still tell depending on whether we see any of that winter precipitation. So for now, we'll continue to monitor it. Again, that was Chief Meteorologist Tim Deegan. I'm Meteorologist Ross Mummah. Thanks for watching, and take care.